Welcome back to EWTN News In Depth as we continue our coverage of the 2024 U.S. election. Momentous changes are afoot, and there is much to discuss from a Catholic perspective. We are joined now by Francis Maier, a senior fellow in the Catholic Studies program at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. His work focuses on the intersection of Christian faith, culture, and public life. And Madeleine Kearns is associate editor at The Free Press. She was previously a staff writer for National Review. Thank you both for joining us during what's been a historic election week. First, I want to get your initial reaction and thoughts to the results we saw just days ago. Fran, I'll go to you first.
I was astounded. I guess I've trained myself to be a pessimist, and so I went into the election evening fearing the worst, but it turned out extremely well, so I'm very happy.
I think a lot of people are surprised by just the overall results. Maddie, what's been your initial reaction to this election week?
Well, I had deja vu from 2016 and just reminded of how wrong the polls can be. Everyone was hedging. They thought it was going to be super close. It ended up not being close at all. We saw this massive red shift in 49 out of the 50 states and DC. They shifted Republican, meaning Trump did much better than he did in 2020. There's also a really astonishing diversity among voters. Trump's gained support from virtually every group, every minority group, whites and Hispanics, blacks, Asian voters, you name it. I think he had the best performance among the Jewish vote in a Republican perhaps ever. So yeah, really astonishing, and I shared Fran's surprise.
Speaking of support for Trump, the Washington Post's exit poll reveals that Trump won the national Catholic vote by a 15-point margin, 56-41. I'd like to dig into that a bit. Fran, this has to go beyond the fact that Kamala Harris skipped the Al Smith charity dinner, right? What do you make of this exit poll finding?
Well, I think practicing Catholics tend toward the Republican Party anyway, not because necessarily of its economic policies, but because it's just more friendly to religious faith. I think that was exaggerated, accelerated in this case, because the Democratic candidate was so obviously secular and disinclined to make any concessions to religious freedom issues. And I think that's one of the reasons, aside from the usual resistance to abortion on the part of practicing Catholics, for the results that happened.
Maddie, the Catholic vote shift represents a 10-point swing in favor of Trump from 2020 to 2024. Why do you think we're seeing this?
Well, part of the obvious explanation is that Biden is a Catholic, and obviously he's a Catholic who's breaking with the church's teachings on key issues such as abortion. But it's clear he has a sincere faith, and he made that part of his campaign. This time, as Fran says, you've seen the opposite. You saw Kamala Harris really just snub Catholics, not just with the Al Smith dinner, but in terms of her rhetoric on abortion, her intolerance for religious exemptions to her extreme abortion agenda. And so, yes, that's going to be off-putting to practicing Catholics, but even to non-practicing Catholics, I think it is significant that Trump moderated his stance and the party stance on abortion. Obviously, this is to the disillusionment of practicing Catholics, but it did have an effect, and the desired effect, if you're talking purely in terms of political strategy.
I want to dig into that momentarily, but first, Fran, you wrote an article for The Catholic Thing this week in which you shared that you did vote for Trump, and you also wrote this election's a reminder that we as Catholics need to live differently, that we need to remember we're a people set apart for the sake of the culture around us. Can you expand on what you mean by that?
Well, I think we can take a lesson from the Jewish community. They're a very creative minority in the culture, but they always remind themselves who they are as a separate people, and cleave to their basic identity and beliefs. And I think we need to remember that that's our task as well. I mean, we're a people set apart. We need to behave that way. We have to contribute effectively to the culture, and I think we do that. But I think we have to be careful about mistaking assimilation and cooperation with just simply being digested by the culture around us. We have to remember, too, that, even a good Caesar, even a very good Caesar, is still Caesar, and Caesar's never a reliable ally. And so we need to live differently in the sense of living with a kind of an active, constant and active awareness that we're here and passing through for the next world. Augustine certainly had that attitude at a time very similar to our own, and I think we need to replicate that in our own lives.
It's a great reminder for us all. Maddie, you wrote what I consider a really smart article for the Free Press this week titled, "Democrats Picked the Wrong Women's Issue." And you say even though Democrats bet big on abortion this election cycle, you say the real winning issue was fighting off the encroachment of biological men into women's spaces in sports. Can you speak to how the gender issue really broke through this cycle?
Yeah, so you would expect from the way that Democrats were messaging their campaign that abortion was going to be a decisive issue. In fact, it wasn't. And it's in part because of the reason I just gave in the last answer, which is that Trump did moderate the party's position on abortion. So while support for abortion access has increased since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, in 2020, half of Americans supported legal access to abortion. In 2024, it was more like 2/3. Even despite that, half of the people who say abortion should be legal in most cases voted for Trump anyway. So it ended up being a bit of a political flop among the electorate. And meanwhile, the Democrats really lost out big on this transgender issue because Republicans spent $215 million in ads. They had done a lot of testing, message testing, and they had seen the difference that it could make when you make the case for female-only sports and spaces. And clearly, it had a big impact. I think it had a big impact, especially among men. We saw that dads were overwhelmingly in support of Trump this time round. I think that's got a lot to do with the sports issue. Nobody wants their daughter competing with biological males. And so, yeah, this was a big issue for them. And I'm sure we're going to see Democrats starting to change their messaging on the transgender issue going forward.
Fran, I want to follow up on Maddie's point. It's no secret that many pro-lifers were upset when Trump and Vance softened their pro-life stance this year. Yet it seems they still voted for the Trump-Vance ticket, and pro-choice people voted for Trump too. CNN exit polls, as Maddie cited, found about half of people who say abortion should be legal in most cases supported Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, I think abortion wasn't the thing that people were thinking about primarily. I mean, the Democratic Party tried to make it the salient issue, but it's simply not. In terms of pro-lifers, I mean, I think reasonable pro-lifers understood that when you have a culture that's had 50 years of catechesis on the importance of abortion as a reproductive right, you're going to change people's opinions. We're now dealing with an environment that has to be recatechized, and that's a very long-term generational issue. So frankly, that didn't surprise me at all. I suspect I agree with Maddie on this, that this is, the Vance comments and the comments of the Republican candidate that were running for president were made perfect sense. I mean, they were simply adjusting to the reality on the ground, and I don't think it really demonstrates a betrayal of the pro-life movement. I mean, the commitment that Trump had to the pro-life movement was always basically a deal to get the right kind of justices in. I didn't expect any more from him than that. He's more sympathetic to our position than the Democratic Party, but he's not fully on board, and I never thought he was, but he's better than the alternative.
Matt, I wanted to give you the opportunity to share if you had any additional thoughts on specifically how the abortion issue played out in the campaigns and ultimately in the polls. Was Harris's abortion stance just seen as too extreme?
I think that's exactly what it was seen as. I mean, it's no secret that Joe Biden's always been uncomfortable with abortion. I know he went with his party in recent years, but he's described himself as being not a fan of abortion, whereas Vice President Harris is very much a fan of abortion. She distinguished herself as the first sitting vice president to attend an abortion facility. She's made no offers of compromises when it comes to religious exemptions. She was also unable to answer a very basic question, which is, do you support any term limits whatsoever? She could not answer that question. And so, of course, compared to her, Trump is the obvious choice if you are a single issue pro-life voter.
Fran, for the first time since Roe v. Wade was overturned, there were states that were able to block pro-abortion amendments. We saw that in Florida, Nebraska, and South Dakota. Does that make you hopeful that we can continue to have pro-life successes in this post-Dobbs era that we're in?
Yes, but again, it's a generational issue. I think the pro-choice, pro-abortion movement in Florida spent $118 million and still lost. So we can win under very difficult circumstances, but they've got an enormous amount of money in pushing the abortion agenda, and that's just going to make the task very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult, and it's going to be a long-term generational war.
And Fran, I wanted to give you the opportunity just to share with our viewers this election week how amid all this political news and buzz, it is important. We have to keep our eyes on Christ to live differently, as you said earlier.
You know, one of the things that I've said this many times. I mean, I've really struggled with anger. We all have a particular sin in our lives that we deal with, and I tend to be prone to anger. And one of the things that's helped me deal with that, the frustrations that build up when you're dealing, particularly with political issues like campaigns like the current one, is just going back to confession, to adoration, and to reading Scripture on a regular basis. Those things which are simple and seem unimportant in the sense that you're not organizing a committee and you're not changing the world. You're changing yourself, though. And when you change yourself, that has a ripple effect on the people around you. So simple things like that, I think, reorient you toward why we're in the world and what our purpose is as believers. And that's where you need to begin a revolution. With the revolution in your own way of looking at things. I really highly recommend it because it's worked for me.
Thank you for that. Again, that's what is most important as well. We so appreciate it. Fran and Maddie, thank you for joining us. I know we'll continue to sift through these results as they continue to come in, but grateful to have you both this election week. Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks.